The U.S. government and others were already thinking about the end of the caretaker period and the transition back to democracy. Both political parties had made mistakes, and one of our big focuses on freedom of speech and freedom of association. I have no restrictions on my actions. I can see what I want, I can go where I want, I can say what I want. There's lots of potential to expand the bilateral economic relationship. There are additional opportunities for U.S. trade and investment. I know a number of people have lost their jobs. There is a risk that everyone recognizes that a non-elected government only has a certain amount of legitimacy. We very much want to see peace. Most importantly, the views of the people of Bangladesh.
Hello everyone, I am Saif Rubab, welcoming you all on behalf of the Bangladesh Dialogue to a special edition of our podcast, The Counter-Narrative. We have with us Mr. Jon Danilowicz. He has been in Bangladesh as a US diplomat. He's a former career US diplomat. And today we'll be talking with him about Bangladesh and the changes in Bangladesh, the greater geopolitical impact, and some other stuff. First of all, thank you for giving us a few of your time, because I know that you have a very busy schedule, but you just managed some time for us. So thank you for that.
Great. No, you're very welcome. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and I still have a hard time understanding why anyone would want to hear what I think, but if there's interest, I'm happy to share my thoughts.
I think you were wrong here. Actually, a lot of people would like to hear from you. So I'll just go in the details. So you have been working as a US diplomat in Bangladesh for quite some time. Till 2015, 2007 to 2015, you have been here through an infamous time of what we call in Bangladesh as 1/11. And afterwards, you have seen the beginning of the regime of Sheikh Hasina. So can you just put some light on it, your experience, how things changed from 2007 to 2015, and two important events?
Sure. Well, first, just let me start by saying that I'm a former U.S. diplomat. I retired from the diplomatic service 3 years ago. Since I retired, I've been outspoken, and my words are my thoughts alone. They don't represent the U.S. government. They don't represent any other interest. I'm here as part of a delegation from a small nonprofit in the United States, Right to Freedom, and we can perhaps talk a little bit more about that. But even here, I'm not speaking on behalf of Right to Freedom. I'm speaking in my own. Before answering your question, I just want to take one step back, because I was first in Bangladesh from 1990 to 92. And that coincided with Ambassador Milam. So that coincided with the end of the Ershad government, the caretaker government, and the elections that brought the Bangladesh Nationalist Party to power. So this, in a sense, right now, this current moment is a third opportunity for change that I've seen in Bangladesh. So to get to your specific question, I wasn't here on January 11, 2007, so I can't speak with any firsthand knowledge about the events that preceded that, nor was I here during the first 6 or so months of that government. So roughly the period that coincides with since July, August until now, maybe a little bit less time. So I picked up the story of the 2007-8 period in August, September of 2007. And by that point, the U.S. government and others were already thinking about the end of the caretaker period and the transition back to democracy. Everyone recognizes that a non-elected government only has a certain amount of legitimacy, and that to fully legitimize the government, you have to go to the people and receive their mandate. So much of our focus during 2007-8 was on preparations for free and fair elections. Of course, we saw the need for reforms, and we certainly supported the reform agenda that the then caretaker government had. We, and I think the people of Bangladesh, were full of hope. We were full of hope that the political class in Bangladesh had learned its lessons, that the period of time between the 1990 end of Ershad and the 2006-2007 period, when the then BNP government came to an end, both political parties had made mistakes. The overall quality of democracy and governance had declined. There was a reset in 2007-8, and we had high hopes and expectations that things would be different. We put a lot of time and effort into assisting the government of Bangladesh in holding free, fair, and credible elections. And we agreed with the international and domestic consensus that those elections in 2008 were free, fair, and credible. That's not to say that there weren't some problems, but the overall result reflected the will of the Bangladeshi people. Obviously, the election resulted in a huge mandate for the then Awami League government, and that government, during this initial period of time after 2009, seemed to be getting off to a pretty good start. They had some good people, they had a reform agenda, and they had said and done all of the right things up to that point. It became apparent, though, within a very short period of time, that the hopes and aspirations of the people of Bangladesh and ourselves wouldn't be fully realized. I eventually left Bangladesh in 2014. I still had my family here, so I came back and forth between 2014 and 15. But over the subsequent 9 years or 10 years, I followed Bangladesh from afar, and I joined other friends of Bangladesh in being saddened by the state of democracy and human rights in Bangladesh, leading up to and including the period of the July Revolution.
Thank you. You have put some lights on many things that we probably didn't hear from first people in position of yours as your previous position you were in. So I'd like to ask you another thing, that how it is different this time from your last visit to Bangladesh.
Well, I mean, obviously,
Because in between, you shifted your role from, it since 2014, you were in the position from a US diplomat.
right.
Later on, you kept coming for your families, and later on, you left the job, and then you focused on the democratic restoration of Bangladesh. So, how is it different
Sure.
this time?
So the organization I work with is called Right to Freedom, and one of our big focuses on freedom of speech and freedom of association. So while I was a diplomat, obviously when I spoke on behalf of the U.S. government. My actions and my associations, as it were related to my job and those responsibilities. It's been liberating for me personally to come back to Bangladesh in this new capacity, where I have no restrictions on my actions. I can see what I want, I can go where I want, I can say what I want. So part of the reason I am so passionate about promoting freedom of speech is because I value my own freedom of speech so much. So it's been wonderful. I mean, the reception has been so warm. We've been able to meet with people across Bangladeshi society. We've met many old friends, including Professor Yunus. We've met new friends. We've connected with people who we've met online, and now we see them in the real world. So it's been personally very rewarding. I've had some very memorable encounters with individuals, some of whom I thought I would never see again, including, Barrister Arman, who was one of the victims of enforced disappearance. I'm saddened, of course, by the friends who are no longer with us, some who have passed in the intervening years. But I will leave Bangladesh soon with a sense of guarded optimism that perhaps this time Bangladesh's fresh start will lead to a road whereby the dreams and aspirations of the people, not just those who participated in the revolution in July, but also those going back to the liberation struggle. They had dreams and hopes for this country. I think those hopes and dreams have largely not been fulfilled, but perhaps this time we hope against hope that the outcome will be different.
So, as you mentioned in the first reply, that you have seen like three transitions, like in 1990s, then in 2008, then post 2006, basically, and then this time. So, do you think that you have met people from different political spheres as well during this visit? So, do you feel that there is an actual urge of change in those political spheres as well? Are the politicians ready for the reform or the to fulfill the aspirations of the Bangladeshi people?
So there's certainly the potential for reform, and the political parties we've met, I think, sense the desire for reform and change. If you judge them by what they've written and what they've said, they've been largely supportive. But ultimately, they say that, the proof is in the pudding. I think there's reason for skepticism. And in the past, politicians have promised one thing and done another. And from my perspective, both as an individual and from my organizational perspective, I always find it interesting to interact with political leaders depending on the role that they have. So again, I've followed Bangladesh for 30 plus years, and many friends I've known for this entire period. I've known them when they were in government. I've known them when they were in opposition. I've known them during an interim government. I've known them during a political government. I've known them when they were in jail. I've known them when they put other people in jail. And not surprisingly, their attitudes and opinions change depending on what position they hold. They say where you stand is where you sit. So I'm hoping all of my friends who were in the opposition, who were promoting democracy, working against fascism, who participated in the coalition that brought democracy back, or at least the potential for democracy, I hope they realize that my principles won't change just because their positions change. And those who these days consider me a friend, I hope if they're in office and they do things that I'm critical of, when I criticize them, they will still consider me friends and realize that sometimes it's your friends who have to give you the toughest messages.
Yeah, and probably we can also hope that your visa is not rejected like Mr. Ambassador Williams' visa that's been rejected for 10 years. I was so surprised when I got to know that a few days back we met on an iftar. I was very shocked, and we were talking. How is this even possible? Like a former ambassador to the country is being rejected, and then again he is a U.S. ambassador. Yeah. So I ask you something about the U.S. politics. It's been having a major change, as I see it. Probably you see it in a bit differently since the second presidency of Donald Trump started, and he has done, what should I say? He has done some tremendous job in shifting the geopolitical balance and the world order that's been led by the United States itself. So, is it really that damaging as people are talking about it, or it is just something new that we haven't seen before? So that's why we need to like settle down for a while to see what action happens.
Sure. So first of all, I should say it's a matter of public record that I'm a member of the Republican Party. I hold a position at the local level in my town Republican Party. I've never held partisan political office. I'm not going to tell you who I voted for, but I have a certain I have a certain American kind of political identity and worldview. So some may consider what I say, colored by that, and so be it. We all have our background and our biases. Sure. But here's what I would say as objectively as possible. I mean, this is a moment of real change in the United States. Again, it's not an isolated incident. You can see a pattern of events over previous years. And ultimately, in our system, the American people have spoken that they were presented with two alternatives in the November election, and President Trump won a impressive mandate, both in terms of winning the popular vote and the majority of the electoral college. So as president, he certainly has the prerogative to exercise the powers of the presidency, and when they come to foreign policy, the executive branch has a leading role. That's not to say his is the only voice. The Congress has an important role to play. Civil society, think tanks, there are a number of inputs into foreign policy. Thus far, the headlines have been dominated by the actions of the executive branch. So far, many people who President Trump has nominated have not yet been confirmed. So his administration is staffed by a very thin layer of political appointees at the top of agencies, and then career employees who continue to run the agencies on a day-to-day basis. In the coming months, there'll be more political appointees in. And I think at that point, we'll have a much better sense of what the policies are. So, for example, when it comes to Bangladesh or South Asia, we don't yet have key people in place in the South Asia Bureau at the State Department. We don't have key people in place in other agencies. There are some people in place at the National Security Council. So, for example, on the first day that he was in office, Secretary of State Rubio met with his counterparts from the Quad, the United States, India, Australia, and Japan. And they talked about their broad objectives in the Indo-Pacific region. And frankly, if you compared the statement that came out of the Quad meeting with similar documents during the Biden administration, you wouldn't see much difference, because fundamentally U.S. interests in the Indo-Pacific...
Fundamentally, for a longer term, U.S. interest hasn't changed. But I'd ask you here that there is a sense that during the first Trump administration, Trump really looked Bangladesh through the eye of a partner of theirs in the region. So this time, there is this skepticism. So
Sure.
will the U.S. do look into Bangladesh?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a question I used to get all the time, and I've gotten since I've been here. President Trump has said that he will pursue an America First foreign policy. That's not new. He said that in the first administration. To be honest, any administration would follow an America First foreign policy. Any government in Bangladesh will follow a Bangladesh First foreign policy. Of course, the devil is in the details, and what the Trump administration may think is putting America first might be different than someone else might. So I think the real test is to see how effectively President Trump's foreign policy achieves U.S. foreign policy objectives, how it implements the strategies that he's put forward. And obviously, it's far too early to tell. With regard to the Indo-Pacific region and the U.S. partnership with India, which you're alluding to, the U.S.-India relationship has been growing steadily over the years. So that's the trend that's continued in Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, and, I have no reason to believe it won't continue during the Trump administration. That's for a variety of reasons. It's because of the private sector interests of U.S. companies and Indian companies to increase bilateral trade, investment, and prosperity. There's a growing Indian American community that obviously cares deeply about America, but also wants to see the U.S. and India relationship grow and may have interests in India as well. And the same holds true for Bangladesh. It's a similar determinant. The Congress obviously has a role to play, and there are strong ties between members of Congress and U.S.-India relationship over the years. As an India caucus, for example, on Capitol Hill. So the trend of U.S.-India relationship is going to continue in the Trump administration. I understand your question, your concern though. What you're concerned at is that the U.S. relationship with Bangladesh will be adversely affected by the U.S. relationship with India. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the case. There's no reason on its face why a strong U.S.-India relationship should be detrimental to Bangladesh's interests or U.S.-Bangladesh relations. In my experience, there have been times for sure when U.S. policymakers have taken into account the views of India. When we deal with any country in the world, we take into account the views of others, both our allies and our adversaries. Neighbors obviously have important interests. So when I served in other countries, for example, my last posting in South Sudan, we would often consult with the governments in Kenya and Uganda and Ethiopia. We'd consult with the Norwegian government, the British government, because we wanted to understand their views, their perspectives, and how our actions in South Sudan could be more effective by working together with others. So it's absolutely the same here in Bangladesh. We talk to the Indians, we talk to other countries, we talk to other partners. And that goes into our decision making. When it comes to thinking about the broader competition with China, each member, say, with whom we work has its own interests. They have their own piece to contribute. We've determined that one way to effectively advance our interests is to work particularly closely with a small group of countries, the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. It's called the Quad. So the fact that the United States works with these partners in the Indo-Pacific more broadly clearly means that when it comes to the relationships individually and collectively with the states in the region, we'll take the views of others into account. So as I look at the Trump administration going forward, I am certain that we will have conversations with India about Bangladesh. We will probably have conversations with Bangladesh about India. At the end of the day, though, my hope and expectation is that as the Trump administration looks at U.S. interests and priorities in Bangladesh, they'll do so based on what's in the best interest of the United States, taking into account the views of many, most importantly, the views of the people of Bangladesh, but also the views of the American people, who ultimately are the ones who have sovereignty in our system.
Thank you, Victor. That was very insightful. So coming from your answer, as far as I have seen it, or I have observed, President Trump is more focused on China rather than any other adversary or in typical sense. So it's because of the competition is in between China and USA for the local run, I think, as well. So Bangladesh is in between those two great power rivalries. If you think about the investment thing, China has big investments in Bangladesh in last decade. in the United States has been one of the biggest partners as well. So as far as I see it, uh, United States won't like Bangladesh to go in bed with China in a very close manner. So what's the best way to balance the big power rivalry for Bangladesh, for a country like ours, and especially in such critical times?
Sure. Well, again, as I said earlier, the United States is pursuing an America First policy. I hope and expect that Bangladesh's current and future governments will pursue Bangladesh First policies. I think as the United States, when we look at our relationship with Bangladesh or really any other country, our goal is to become the partner of choice. Now, resources are limited, priorities have to be set, and clearly for the Trump administration, given the fiscal realities at home, given the costs of U.S. engagement around the world, both in terms of development assistance, military assistance, diplomatic resources, we have to make some tough choices. So one of the things the Trump administration has signaled is because of the significance and the importance they place on the relationship with China and the Indo-Pacific region, we would like to see some of our other partners and allies assume more of the burden for dealing with some of the other global challenges. A perfect example of this is the situation between Russia and Ukraine. We very much want to see peace. We want to see Europe lead. We want to see others share the responsibility and the burden as it were. This doesn't mean we're not interested in the region. It just means that choices have to be made. So my expectation is the U.S. will be focused on the Indo-Pacific. And Bangladesh, by its geographic position, by its population size, for a number of other factors, is an important partner for us. So what we're going to have to do in consultation with Bangladesh and with other partners is to figure out what's the best contribution Bangladesh can make. And most important in diplomacy, as in life, is communication. So my hope is that the United States and Bangladesh will have good lines of communication. In my experience in the past, people have judged the level of relationship between two countries based solely on the contact at the highest level. If a head of state visits or if a head of state talks or meets, then that means the relationship is important. If that doesn't happen, then the relationship isn't important. But in my experience, the work gets done at much lower levels. And when leaders get together, there's a symbolic value and there's a point at which perhaps that forces decisions or it sends messages to others. So in this period, I think from the beginning of the Trump administration, it's important for the United States to talk with its friends in Bangladesh, the interim government now, and in preparation of the election to talk with the political parties to help signal and to be explicit about what U.S. interests are and U.S. priorities, and to hear what Bangladesh's interests and priorities are. So to your question with China, I think the answer really depends. Yeah, the United States wants to be the partner of choice. When it comes to the commercial competition, the United States will want American companies to compete on a level playing field. There may be some areas in which U.S. companies, frankly, aren't competitive in the Bangladesh market, and perhaps China or India or a third party is going to be more competitive. So if it's free and open competition and U.S. companies don't win, well, so be it. I mean, there's a global market and we compete economically around the world. Similarly, when it comes to security, there are good reasons for any state to have security relationships with any number of states, not only for contingencies within the region, but I think Bangladesh has special interest because of its global role in peacekeeping operations. So, for example, in South Sudan, Bangladesh provided one of the largest contingents of troops. The deputy force commander was a Bangladeshi major general, and there were contingents from many other nations, including China. So obviously, China and Bangladesh peacekeepers have to work together. So the fact that they have some ties, some exchanges, is a good thing for Bangladesh. It's a good thing for China. It's a good thing for the United States. But certainly there are areas of cooperation which are more problematic. And I think on those, we would have those discussions. When it comes to development projects, etc., there may be some areas in which Chinese assistance makes sense. So I don't think you can make a blanket statement that if you simply look at the number of engagements with a country or the value of assistance, that you can make some decision about whether a country is, tilting towards one side or the other. I think it really depends on specifics. And I think, whether the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship is weakened by Bangladesh's engagement with other countries really depends on the specific circumstances. And again, it's far too early to speculate on how that'll turn out in this administration or in when the next political government comes.
Okay. And one last question about President Trump's involvement. It's because I have been asking too much about him.
No, please.
The thing is, you know all about the Sheikh Hasina's regime and what happened after the regime fell and when she fled and what happened to the big number of allies she had and her apartment. So since the presidency of Donald Trump took place and he took over the office, there is a huge rumor around the social circles and especially the social media platforms that Donald Trump's being elected in the second term, it's some sort of a gift for Sheikh Hasina. There is just this rumor, and that's surely not credible. But coming from someone from the U.S. with experience in the government, what's your point of view?
Yeah. So in my experience and my expectation is that the U.S. doesn't take sides in the political competition in Bangladesh. So one of the strengths of the U.S. relationship with Bangladesh since 1971, and I'll be the first to confess that the U.S. made a mistake in 1971. We were on the wrong side, and it took us some time to make up from that. But I think from, say, the mid-1970s on, the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship has had more good times than bad. It's fluctuated at times. In recent years, it's been challenging. But that's not because that we favor one party or another. It's because of the underlying reality. And when you look at the United States, there's been a broad bipartisan consensus. There have been Republicans who supported our engagement in Bangladesh, and there have been Democrats. In times when democracy or other issues were off track, we had Republicans who were critical and Democrats who were critical. What's happened in the U.S. recently, which I think is a warning sign and ultimately would be detrimental to U.S. and Bangladesh relations, is how the issue of support for Bangladesh has become politicized and has become a partisan issue in the United States. So I think it's less about, Donald Trump and his relationship with world leaders, and it's more about some structural issues in which the Democratic Party is largely seen as having been supportive of an agenda that's aligned with the pro-democracy movement and has been critical of the previous regime. That partially reflects the interests of the Bangladeshi American community, who are largely in what we call blue states. They're in urban areas and in states where there's been traditionally democratic elected leaders. So it's not surprising at all that elected officials would reflect the views of their constituents. There's certainly a trend in recent times in which people have tried to politicize support for Bangladesh and to paint the U.S. strong support for democracy and human rights as simply a Democratic Party agenda.
And then they also donated in the Trump campaign.
And certainly people try to influence political, actions in the United States using the freedoms that they have. And I certainly wouldn't criticize that. But there is a risk that there is a change in how people have traditionally engaged in the U.S. political system. So there's no reason why the Republican Party, which is a party of freedom, which is a party that has stressed the importance of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and association and limited role of government and the free market. All of these things are very consistent with the free and open and democratic Bangladesh. So part of what I've done in my personal capacity, when I've seen others try to manipulate the U.S. political system by pushing a narrative that is false, which is disinformation, which is intended to impact the U.S. political system, I've called that out. I've said it is what it is. And I've tried to compete with the disinformation and, frankly, the lies with the truth.
Yeah,
So
we have seen during the regime as well. On Twitter, I first noticed you on Twitter that fighting those misinformation, disinformation campaigns of Sheikh Hasina's regime. Yes, please continue.
No, so I'll give you a very concrete example. There's an event that's being organized for the 25th of March in Washington, D.C., organized by an advocacy group in the United States. They've lined up several speakers, each of whom is well known for having a strong partisan viewpoint and a certain agenda that they're pushing. The Hindu genocide underway in Bangladesh, the Islamist takeover led by Muhammad Yunus, and the Chinese domination of Bangladesh during this period. Again, each of those is demonstrably false. It's not true. It's disinformation. It's lies. But people are putting that forward because they're trying to influence American lawmakers. They're trying to influence the Trump administration, and they're trying to influence American public opinion. They have freedom and rights just as I do. I'm not trying to silence them, but I am trying to point out that when people are doing something with an agenda, those who are listening, the consumers, should understand where those people are coming from. And if somebody else has a better alternative viewpoint, they should also consider that.
Many thanks for the reply on President Trump and his views and probably changes in Bangladesh. I would ask you another thing: Bangladesh's role in the South Asia region, and probably in greater Southeastern Asia as well. Bangladesh has recently asked for the ASEAN membership, and we have SAARC, which is not working right now for let's say India's objection, some sort of discomfort to work probably with Pakistan and few other countries. So do you think that SAARC it can be operable again, or it's just a lost cause?
Sure. Well, I mean, in diplomacy, as in life, you don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So Bangladesh is smart to explore, different avenues for advancing its agenda. There may be Bangladesh interests that can be advanced most appropriately through SAARC. There are others that may be advanced through organizations like BIMSTEC. If Bangladesh were granted membership in ASEAN, that could be to its advantage. There's the D8, there's the number of other forums in which Bangladesh participates. So what I would say is that each government approaches foreign policy a little bit differently. I understand Professor Yunus has had a long-standing interest in SAARC and has worked in other capacities with people from throughout the region. So I don't see anything sinister and nefarious in the fact that, his administration has talked about how to revitalize SAARC while at the same time looking to expand horizons by, working closely with the ASEAN states.
And another prospect is that United States has been vocal about Bangladesh democratic transition at least for the last few years, as we have seen. So right now, after the departure of Ambassador Peter D. Haas, there has been no new appointments. One charge d'affaires has been appointed after the election of President Trump, and that can be for a lot of reasons. But is that the thing you were talking about, that there has been very little political appointees till date, or for some other reason, or for till the transition of a new government, you would have another ambassador? What's the reason?
So if you look at U.S. diplomatic representation around the world, there's a mix of career employees who are appointed as ambassadors and political appointees. But ultimately, whether somebody comes from a career diplomatic background or other walks of life, they're nominated by the president, and they serve as the president's personal representative for as long as the president wants them to. They're confirmed by the U.S. Senate, and then they come and they serve for whatever term, the president wants them to serve. Up until this point, all of the U.S. ambassadors in Bangladesh have been career appointees, and we have been blessed by having many talented, amazing U.S. ambassadors, and Peter Haas is the latest in a long line of these. My current, colleague, Ambassador William Milam, was an amazing ambassador. I worked for Ambassador Jim Moriarty during that 111 period. I had the opportunity to work closely with Ambassador Mozina during my time as Deputy Chief Official. One of my mentors was Ambassador Howard Schaefer, who was here earlier, and I've known many other U.S. ambassadors along the way. The previous ambassador nominee at the end of the Biden administration, David Mealy, would have been an excellent ambassador as well. He knew the country well. He had been Deputy Chief of Mission. He had served in China. He was nominated by President Biden, but the U.S. Senate was not able to act on his confirmation, along with that of many other nominees, before the end of the last session of Congress. So according to our rules, if somebody's not confirmed by the end of the Senate term, the nomination expires and a new person has to be nominated. When a new administration comes in, as President Trump has come in, there's any number of positions that they have to fill. And there's obviously a prioritization. So it's not surprising that the most senior positions are nominated first, and then other positions are nominated later. So I'm confident that the Trump administration is in internal consultations, including the State Department, on whether at this time they want to send a career employee or a political appointee to Bangladesh. Once that individual is selected, there's a process whereby the name is shared with the government of Bangladesh. The government of Bangladesh grants what we call agreement. There's other internal vetting. The nomination is announced. It's sent to the Senate, and then the Senate confirmation process goes forward. It's a lengthy process. In other countries, a head of state or a foreign minister will select an individual, and then that person will be off to their coast in a very short time. In our system, it takes quite a long time. We're very fortunate that we have a very experienced, talented career diplomat who served as an ambassador 3 times, currently as the Charge d'Affaires in the U.S. Embassy.
Yes, the Charge d'Affaires currently has a very reputable career, right? So I was not questioning.
What I'm saying is that just the fact that she's here indicates that it was a priority for the Biden administration, and it continues to be a priority for the Trump administration to ensure that we have a senior ambassadorial level person leading the mission. So even though they haven't been confirmed by the Senate for this specific job, in terms of the level of U.S. engagement or the level of U.S. support for Bangladesh, the fact that we have somebody who's not a confirmed ambassador for this job really shouldn't be interpreted in any negative way. And I'm confident that we'll have a new ambassador here, in due course of time.
I have 2 last questions to you.
Sure.
One is one should be a short answer.
Sure.
Another one can have a long answer.
Yeah.
So the first question is, you have met a lot of people during your Desi visit. So what do you think when the election is going to be held? The next election. You have met Mr. Yunus, you have met DNP, Jamaat leaders, I think. So what do you think?
So obviously I respect the confidences of those who told me something in confidence. So I'm not going to say what one individual has told.
Private after the session.
Sure. Well, I was asked the question in private who I thought would win the election, and that answer is easy. Whoever gets the most votes will win the election. But when it comes to the timing of elections, what I heard in my private conversations and what I heard in public aligns very closely. The expectation is that the election will happen at some point between December of 2025 and perhaps say, early 2026, with most people converging on the turn of the year, whether it be December or January. I've heard nobody in private advocate for a significant curtailment in elections in the coming, 3 months would be presumably the earliest they could happen. Nobody in private has told me they think or want elections should be in 3 months. And similarly, nobody in private has told me that they believe elections should or will be, indefinitely postponed or in a date, much beyond what's happened. They think everyone realizes that the time frame that's been laid out is the most realistic one, and all the parties seem to be preparing for elections during that time frame.
Well, thank you for this answer. And one last question. Soon after the transition, after the hopeful potential pre-their elections that's going to be held, hopefully in 1 year time period, the new government will have a very different fiscal reality, just like the government of Professor Yunus is having. The fiscal conditions are very dire, so the government will have to take a lot of steps which are going to be unpopular. But at that time, a country like Bangladesh will need help from their long-time trusted partners. Do you think that partners like United States and Westerns will be willing to help the uniform government with all those necessities?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is that it's easy to forget what a crisis there was in the economy before the July and August period. And a number of people have told me during this visit that had the events of July and August not taken place within some period of time, there would have been an economic crisis here that could have triggered something very similar. So the interim government, in my estimation, deserves great credit for stabilizing the macroeconomic situation. They've had to take some tough decisions already. There may be some more tough decisions coming. It's hard to prove a negative. So we can't say for sure that there would have been an economic collapse had the government not taken these steps. But I think most economists agree that this government has done the right thing and give the bank governor, the finance advisor, and others very high marks. Now, in terms of the future, I know there's concern about the U.S. assistance freeze and some of the cancellation of some programs. And I don't want to in any way diminish the impact on the lives of the beneficiaries or the challenges that those who worked for the U.S. government or our implementing partners are faced. I know a number of people have lost their jobs, have had to look for other employment. There's a ripple effect throughout the economy because of the importance of the development sector here. I know some others are picking up the slack, and that's welcome, but it's probably likely that not all of the U.S. assistance will be replaced in the short term. The U.S. doesn't only act bilaterally, we act through international organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, UN specialized agencies, and those programs have continued to a greater or lesser degree. In terms, though, of looking forward and the next government, the U.S. and Bangladesh relationship long ago ceased to be defined by the amount of U.S. assistance that came. I mean, Bangladesh is not a beggar nation. Bangladesh's livelihood and welfare doesn't depend on the amount of donor dollars. And if you look at the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship in particular, I'd ask you and your listeners to focus on things like the U.S.-Bangladesh trade. And obviously, garments have been at the top of that agenda. And the impact of the garment sector in Bangladesh has been massive and will continue to be. So that dwarfs any U.S. assistance. Similarly, the flow of remittances from Bangladeshis in the United States to Bangladesh is significant and growing. The U.S. is the largest source of remittances. There's lots of potential to expand the bilateral economic relationship. There are additional opportunities for U.S. trade and investment. There's opportunities for diversification of exports. There's opportunities for energy cooperation. So these are the things that the Trump administration has stressed are going to be their priorities. We're fortunate that at the end of April, the government of Bangladesh is hosting an investment summit. We expect a strong participation by the U.S. private sector. I've been told that the entire U.S. Bangladesh Business Council's board is coming. And that will be an opportunity for U.S. companies, investors, trading partners to talk not only to the interim government, but to Bangladesh's business community. And I'm sure they'll interact with political actors who may in the future be in government. So if I were a future government of Bangladesh, or if I were a Bangladeshi citizen, I would advocate for development assistance in the areas where it has the greatest impact and where there may have been a historic U.S. investment. So, for example, in the public health arena, the ICDDRB has provided life-saving innovations that have helped people in Bangladesh and around the world. U.S. assistance there has been paused. I would hope in the future it would be resumed. U.S. humanitarian assistance, food aid, or other, I think, potentials that could be increased, but other areas may not increase. But that shouldn't be interpreted by the people as a sign of lack of U.S. interest. And I don't think there's any reason, just to ring the alarm bell that if large U.S. aid flows don't continue, then the Bangladesh is going to suffer unnecessarily, or the U.S.-Bangladesh relationship will suffer. So I leave Bangladesh fundamentally optimistic about both the future of this country and the future prospects for the U.S. and Bangladesh relationship.
The feeling is the same in all of us Bangladeshis. And thank you again for your time. And thank you very much, first. We just concluded here. Thank you, viewers. And please be with us for the next episode. Thank you.